I seem to be able to put my feelings down in a song easier than I can talk about it. I play me better than anybody.
They once called him the Buddha of country music, the man who forgave everyone, the gentle soul who never held a grudge. But that was a lie. At 92, Willie Nelson isn't whispering peace anymore. He's naming names. 7 of them. 7 artists who betrayed him, mocked his faith, or turned brotherhood into bitterness. Some were legends. Some were like family. And one was the last person anyone ever thought he could hate. At the top of that list, Garth Brooks. To the world, he's the showman who brought country to stadiums. But to Willie, he's the man who sold out its soul. The feud began quietly, back in the early days, when Willie was still driving dusty highways with Trigger by his side, playing for folks who could barely afford the ticket. Meanwhile, Brooks was flying across arenas on wires, drenched in pyrotechnics and applause. The crowd saw a spectacle. Willie saw something else entirely. The moment country music stopped being truth and started being business. And to this day, Nashville insiders say that wound never healed. To Willie, it wasn't just a performance, it was a funeral for authenticity. "You can't sell struggle if you've never lived it," he muttered to a bandmate after watching Garth's theatrical show, where Friends in Low Places felt more like a Broadway number than a barroom confession. The unspoken tension finally erupted in 2004, inside the glittering halls of the Country Music Hall of Fame. Garth stood on stage, all smiles, calling Willie the conscience of country music. The cameras caught a touching tribute. But backstage, Willie's eyes told a different story. He leaned in, voice low and steady, and said, "Next time, sing it like you mean it." Those 7 words spread through Nashville like wildfire. Since that night, he's turned down every duet, every shared stage, every photo op with Garth Brooks. To Willie, what Garth built wasn't country, it was plastic perfection. Then came number 2, Shania Twain, the queen who broke Willie's faith in country music. Willie never cared for glamour. He didn't mind rhinestones or showlights. But Shania's rise made him furious. He once joked, not so jokingly, that her concerts looked more like Vegas than Nashville. For a man who spent a lifetime chasing truth in every verse, watching Shania turn country into choreography felt like witnessing a friend trade her soul for sequins. Their quiet clash began in the late 90s, when hits like "Man, I Feel Like a Woman," and "That Don't Impress Me Much" ruled the airwaves. Nashville celebrated. Willie didn't. On tour, he told a sound engineer, "Country's supposed to bleed, not sparkle." The words traveled fast. And before long, everyone in town knew Willie Nelson couldn't stand the pop country revolution she was leading. The breaking point came under the bright lights of the CMA Awards. The night Shania Twain was crowned Entertainer of the Year, Willie Nelson sat just a few rows behind her, silent, still, his face carved in stone. The cameras caught him clapping, smiling even, like a proud elder of country music. But backstage, the truth slipped out. He leaned toward a friend and muttered, "Entertainer, maybe. But that ain't country." Moments later, Shania approached him, all charm and grace, ready to shake his hand. Willie gave a polite nod, then walked right past her as if she were air. The industry called it arrogance. Willie called it honesty. To him, Shania had traded heartache for choreography, real storytelling for radio formulas. She was living proof, he said, that country music had lost its backbone. Even now, mention her name around Willie, and he'll quietly change the subject. For a man who's forgiven almost everyone, Shania Twain remains the one he never let back in. Then came number 3, Waylon Jennings, the brother who turned his back. Of all the names on Willie's list, this was the one that cut the deepest. Because this wasn't business. This was blood. They built the outlaw country movement side by side, 2 rebels against the Nashville machine. But behind the brotherhood, something darker was waiting: jealousy. By the late 70s, Waylon had grown bitter. Every headline read, "Willie and Waylon, never Waylon and Willie." The order mattered more than anyone realized. He started showing up late to sessions, drinking harder, arguing about songwriting credits. Those close to them said Waylon would roll his eyes whenever someone called Willie the face of outlaw country. One night in the studio, it finally cracked. Waylon snapped, yelling, "You're too stoned to play straight." Willie just smiled and said nothing. But he never forgot. Their friendship shattered for good a few years later, during a joint interview in the early '80s. Half joking, half resentful, Waylon called him a hippie in cowboy boots who forgot where he came from. The audience laughed. Willie didn't. And from that moment on, the Outlaw Brothers were never truly brothers again. It drew laughs from the reporters, but not from Willie. When the cameras shut off, he quietly stood up, walked away, and never called Waylon again. The bond that once built the outlaw movement was gone, reduced to silence and distance. When Waylon Jennings died in 2002, Willie didn't show up to the funeral. He sent flowers instead, along with a handwritten note that simply read, "See you on the road somewhere." Those close to him said that was Willie's way of saying goodbye, and admitting that the wound never truly healed. Number 4. Toby Keith, the patriot who pushed too far. Willie Nelson didn't just dislike Toby. He despised what Toby had turned country music into. Their feud wasn't really about melody, it was about meaning, about pride and politics. Willie once said, "A guitar should never wave a flag." Everyone in Nashville knew who that line was meant for. Their quiet war began in the early 2000s, right after Toby released Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue. The song became a patriotic anthem, but to Willie, it sounded more like propaganda. Later, at a veteran benefit concert in Austin, Willie took the stage preaching unity. Then Toby came out after him, waving the flag, shouting slogans, turning the show into a campaign rally. Willie watched from the wings, disgusted. When Toby stepped off stage, Willie stopped him cold. "You're using music to fight, not to heal," he said. Toby laughed and walked away. That was the breaking point. From that night on, Willie refused to share a lineup, a benefit, or even a poster with Toby Keith. Behind closed doors, he called Toby's act a commercial wrapped in camouflage. Years later, Toby tried to reach out through a mutual friend, saying he meant no harm. Willie never replied. He told his crew, "I've met louder men, but not many emptier ones." And from that day forward, everyone in Nashville knew the unspoken rule: if Toby Keith was on the bill, Willie Nelson was out. Number 5. Merle Haggard, the friend who crossed the line. When Merle Haggard took a jab at Willie Nelson, it wasn't just another musician running his mouth. It was a brother cutting deep. These two men had shared buses, motel rooms, and songs. Together, they built the outlaw sound that reshaped country music. But somewhere along the road, that bond cracked, and when it did, it left scars neither of them could hide. Somewhere between the tours and the years, Merle forgot one simple truth: Willie Nelson never forgets. It began harmlessly enough. Merle started joking in interviews that Willie's love for weed had turned him into a mascot, not a musician. At first, Willie laughed it off. But then Merle said it again, this time on stage, with Willie sitting just a few feet away. "Weed's a lazy man's crutch," Merle said into the microphone. The crowd roared with laughter. Willie didn't. He just kept strumming, finished the song, and walked straight to his bus without a word. From that night on, everything changed. The joint album they had planned quietly vanished from the calendar. Willie's manager started declining Merle's calls. Fans kept asking when the two legends would reunite, but they never did. Years later, Merle tried to make peace. He reached out, said it was all just a joke. Willie only replied, "Some things you don't joke about." It wasn't anger anymore. It was disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than rage. When Merle Haggard passed in 2016, Willie called him one of the greats. But friends noticed he never added, "one of my best friends." That silence said everything. Their brotherhood ended with a line that could never be crossed back. Number 6. Kris Kristofferson, the words Willie never forgave. Can one sentence really end a 40-year friendship? For Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson, it did. These two weren't just peers, they were brothers who'd fought through the same storms, shared the same buses, and carried each other through fame, loss, and redemption. But one careless remark was all it took to burn 4 decades of loyalty. It happened at a private fundraiser in the mid-2000s, a smoky room filled with songwriters, reporters lurking in the back, and glasses of whiskey on every table. Willie had just finished performing a soft, aching ballad about farm workers and war, a song meant to heal, not divide. But the next words that came from Kris would shatter something Willie thought was unbreakable. When Willie stepped off the stage that night, Kris Kristofferson was already surrounded by a circle of songwriters, half-buzzed and laughing. He leaned in and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Willie's turned into more of a mascot than a musician." The room erupted in laughter, except for Willie. He heard every word. Those nearby said he froze for just a second, then quietly turned and walked out into the night without saying a thing. By morning, his assistant had already cancelled their next duet session. The calls stopped. The friendship went silent. When people later asked what happened, Willie just said, "Sometimes words don't fade, they stain." That was all he ever admitted publicly. Kris tried to apologize through a mutual friend, but Willie refused to meet. His only response was soft but final, "You don't get to call me brother after that." 40 years of trust, gone in one careless sentence. Number 7. Kid Rock, the wild one who went too far. When Willie Nelson agreed to collaborate with Kid Rock, everyone thought it would be wild, maybe even legendary. Instead, it became one of the ugliest studio fallouts of Willie's long career. Willie came for music. Kid came for chaos. It happened in Nashville around 2008, during Kid Rock's self-proclaimed outlaw phase. He pitched Willie a bold idea, a rebellious anthem, raw and genre-bending. Willie, always open to experimentation, said yes. But the moment Kid Rock stumbled in late, beer in hand, blasting his own tracks over the studio speakers, Willie knew he'd made a mistake. Musicians who were there that night said Kid ignored every bit of direction, shouting, "Let it be raw," as he drowned Willie's vocals in distortion. Willie stayed calm, suggesting a softer, more soulful arrangement. Kid smirked and said, "Come on, old man, loosen up." That was it. Willie quietly took off his headphones, stood up, and walked out without a word. The session ended right there. The track was never released. Later, when a journalist asked what happened, Willie simply replied, "Some fires are better left unlit." But behind that calm was real disgust. Since that night, he's refused every collaboration, every event, every handshake with Kid Rock. To Willie, he was just another loud voice with nothing real to say. So what do you think? Was Willie Nelson right to cut them off? Or should time have healed those wounds? Tell us your thoughts below, and if any of these names surprised you, don't forget to hit that like button.